The year is 2007. The month is February. I am 8, going on 9 years old, and I cannot beat Buried Relic. No matter how hard I try, the Pikachu and Swampert duo I bring into the dungeon always finds a way to lose around bottom floor 67. Of course, I'm not trying to get to the 99th floor. While that would be ideal and very cool to do, I could probably brag about it to my friends at Adventure Club. My true goal is recruiting Mew. Despite the fact that I've recruited Regirock, Regice, and Registeel, and have obtained all 3 parts they drop to create the music box, the item that needs to be in the party's inventory to even have a chance at finding a Mew, I have not had any luck whatsoever. In all my hours of playing Buried Relic, not once have I seen the fateful message, Mew used transform. But that will change tonight. I lie in wait underneath the navy-colored covers of my bed. Game Boy Advance SP tucked carefully beneath my pillow, up against the wall in such a way that any major investigation by my parents will yield no adverse result for me. When the green lines on the digital clock sitting next to my lamp turn from 9:29 to a new set of lines showing 9:30, I will make my move. But I have to be careful. My brother sleeps in a bed opposite me, and is no stranger to telling our parents exactly what I've been up to between the time they put us to bed and the time he will inevitably crawl into their bed to sleep with them a couple hours later. And he'll tell them all about how he saw his older brother's face all lit up from the light of his Game Boy Advance SP. And they'll regret having gotten me such a thing in the first place. You see, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team was the only game I really had at this point in my fledgling gaming career. I only received my Game Boy Advance a few months prior at Christmas, with the single roguelite game included to entertain me. While I had also received a few hand-me-down Game Boy Color games from an older cousin, like Harry Potter for the Game Boy Color, which is actually a really surprisingly good RPG. Check it out. But Red Rescue Team was the only one I'd bothered to play for more than 2 hours. The box it was wrapped in, under the tree, was big. Far too big, in fact, to be a single Game Boy Advance SP. The bland gold and silver wrapping paper that coated the giant cardboard box seemed to imply that its contents were something thoroughly disappointing to an 8 going on 8.5-year-old. Something like a new matching set of a jacket snow pant onesie combo with boots. You know, boring stuff to a kid. Definitely nothing like the Nintendo DS my other cousin Karen had gotten for her birthday only a couple weeks prior. But when I unwrapped the box to find a bunch of newsprint and a smaller box inside, I was confused. Unwrapping that second box yielded heaps of tissue paper and an even smaller third box. But the fourth and fifth box that lay hidden inside the Matryoshka-like gift box setup were what I had been seeking out for so long. A pearl blue Game Boy Advance SP and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team. The Chunsoft-developed Torneko no Daiboken Fushigi no Dungeon is a spin-off of the incredibly popular Dragon Warrior series that centers around the merchant from Dragon Warrior 4, Torneko. As Torneko, the player explores a series of randomly generated mazes, aptly titled the Mystery Dungeon. Dragon Warrior's typical adventuring structure focuses around the player exploring an intentionally designed world, with carefully constructed dungeon maps to traverse in order to eventually face a boss at the end. The dungeon layouts would often be rooms filled with puzzles, or maze-like corridors featuring random encounters and hidden treasure chests. But up until this little spin-off game, the Dragon Warrior dungeons were designed by level designers to carefully guide the player through the labyrinthian construct they had designed. Fushigi no Dungeon, on the other hand, features dungeons that are different, mysterious even. Mysterious, of course, referring to the fact that each floor of the game is randomly generated. Within each mystery dungeon Torneko enters, there are up to 72 unique Dragon Warrior-themed monsters and plenty of potential items that can be sold for money. Ultimately, though, the layout of each floor is randomized, and the most important space on a given floor Torneko and thus the player can find are the stairs leading to the next floor of the dungeon, much like the dungeon structure of the original Dragon Warrior game. This is, as one could guess, the first game in the Mystery Dungeon series. As an avid Mystery Dungeon fan and a Dragon Warrior fan, it is absolutely mind-blowing to me to see how obviously the design of this spin-off series is lifted from the dungeon maps from the first few Dragon Warrior games. Having played many future developments of this formula, and thus having the power of hindsight, it is incredible to see just how splashable this gameplay loop can be in its most base form. Eventually, other iterations of this Mystery Dungeon formula arose in other forms in both original franchises and spin-offs of well-defined franchises. Mystery Dungeon 2, Shiren the Wanderer, took concepts from the original Torneko game and repurposed them for a setting of feudal Japan. Chocobo's Mysterious Dungeon slapped a layer of Final Fantasy-covered paint onto the original framework and called it a day. Fun fact: in looking up Japanese names of Mystery Dungeon games by doing Ctrl+F and typing in Fushigi, meaning strange, I even came upon this one: The Simpsons Bart no Fushigi na Yume no Daiboken. And I thought to myself, a Simpsons Mystery Dungeon game? But alas, it is just Bart's Nightmare. Anyways, it wasn't until 2005 that the Mystery Dungeon formula was applied to the Pokémon franchise, with the creation of Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team for the Game Boy Advance and Pokémon Blue Rescue Team for the Nintendo DS. Being on two different consoles of different processing power, the games needed to be aesthetically simple enough not to overload the Game Boy Advance, but have deep enough gameplay to not bore Nintendo DS players. This, of course, was done by following the previous roguelike structure of other Mystery Dungeon games, distributing all 386 Pokémon into over 40 unique, randomly generated dungeons. This, I feel, was a risk to some extent, as, to the uninformed, the roguelike structure of the Mystery Dungeon franchise can be absolutely brutal. Rescue Team does remove the common permadeath features of other roguelike games, but maintains the unforgiving nature of punishing the player for fainting in a dungeon by having them lose all of their items. This fact is what reviewers like James Milkman Milky wrote in their review in 2006 upon the release of the game, and what drew some of the greatest criticism of this game. Reviewers noted and perhaps criticized the increased difficulty. But as GameSpy noted in their review, Mystery Dungeon may confuse and frustrate others, but its addictive nature should keep you hooked until you learn to appreciate the art of the dungeon crawl. And what an addicting art it was to an 8-year-old who, prior to receiving this gift, was an exclusive LeapPad gamer. I, however, was blissfully ignorant of the series' history. I was just a child hatching a grand conquest to recruit the prize of buried Relic. My parents are sound asleep in their bedrooms on the other side of the stairs, I think to myself, as I look at the green 915 shining in the darkness. It is only a matter of time before I recruit Mew, this time for real. My brother is asleep in his bed, sawing logs and probably dreaming about his webkins or something I wouldn't know. I confirm that the volume is all the way down and that the battery isn't on red, and then I wait for 9:30. Formulating my strategy on how, this time, I'd get Mew. I have finished my prepared set of Wondermail codes, missions into dungeons that would reward me with Reviver Seeds, Max Elixirs, and various sized apples. All items I needed for longevity. I even have X-ray specs that may give me an edge on dodging monster houses that might randomly appear and ruin my fun. The gathering of these items took more than a week or two, many days of which involved smuggling my Game Boy Advance onto the school bus. These items sit in my inventory from my save so that I can immediately jump into the buried relic run. I'm not risking any real-world time. I'm going for what the 2022 me might call the mu% speedrun, if you will. I look up at the glow-in-the-dark plastic stars that have been affixed to the ceiling, their faint green glow illuminating the false night sky. I make a wish upon a stationary shooting star, and then watch the clock roll over to 9:16. Dang. I go over the information again in my head to pass the time. Buried Relic has 99 floors, and Mew appears after the 36th. I have to take the music box, but I can't do anything with it. It's just supposed to take up a spot in my inventory, and that should be enough for Mew to appear. At least I hope that's all I need to do with it. Or maybe I need to play it starting on the 36th floor to appear? I guess I'll find out. I think there's also some HMs on other floors too, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. My Team Storm squad, Pikachu and Swampert, plus Absol, should be a strong enough group to get me deep enough to have a good shot at finding this pink cat critter. As the clock rolls to 9:30, I check that the light to the bathroom and the light to my parents' room are both off, by seeing how much light has seeped through the gap between the floor and the door. When I see that both lights are off, I gird my loins and flip the switch. I'm greeted with a bright white screen, the flash of the words Game Boy, and absolute silence. The thing about my Mystery Dungeon playstyle choices as a kid were that they never really gave me a fighting chance at beating the hardest dungeons. I never actually beat the Murky Cave post-game sequence, since I could never beat Wish Cave. That's right, I couldn't get to the 20th floor of Wish Cave, and I couldn't beat Wish Cave because I never understood how to actually traverse a dungeon with a strategy in mind. To my child brain, the dungeons were meant to be explored to every corner, gathering as much loot as possible. I dodged fights because I was already underleveled, a vicious, self-sustaining cycle that still haunts me in other forms to this day, and, as a result, I found myself struggling on even the most basic dungeon crawls. It also didn't help that I never evolved my starter, Pikachu, because I was the type of kid who wanted to use a Pikachu through the whole game, not understanding that evolution came with a significant easier gameplay loop. I suppose I was stubborn then, playing the way I wanted to play despite missing obvious benefits after all. How much that has changed in recent years is debatable. He's not wearing pants. I will honestly confess that at this point, my memory of the night is hazy. A 15-year-old memory of a single Tuesday night staying up and playing Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team under the cover of darkness is a hard one to differentiate from a 15-year-old memory of a single Wednesday night staying up and playing Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team. But what I can tell you, with very clear confidence, is this. I remember reaching bottom floor 63, the weight of my eyelids acting in defiance of my drive to find Mew. Looking over at the clock, I saw the green lines making a 1:06 a.m., signifying just how long I'd been playing. Each floor prior, I had wandered around, desperately hoping for a single text box that would end my quest and allow me to sleep. As I remember it, at least. What I then remember is a bright light flashing on and the sound of my dad's voice. "What are you still doing in bed? It's 7:30! At that moment, I felt the warmth of my comforter stripped from me as my dad moved to get me out of bed. My mind initially struggled to grasp the concept of the two numbers presented to me. But then it hit me. The bus for school came at 7:45. I was gonna miss the bus. It was from this thought that I remember my dad looking down at my hands, still clutching a, now powered down, console, and then asking me a very rhetorical question. The exact words I have since forgotten, but the tone of it was, "I found something that shouldn't be here. Care to explain?" How cruel it was to do this to his oldest son, when his youngest son had likely wet the bed again. How unfair it was that he asked me right when I woke up, right as I was about to get Mew into my party this time. He stood there, looking down at me, the face of a drill sergeant looking for a sign of weakness on the face of a subordinate. Woe to the child who has to experience this confrontation. While it is, and likely will be, a shared multi-generational experience, I knew going in that being caught staying up playing my Game Boy Advance all night by my dad was one of the worst things that could happen to me. My gaming privileges? Gone. My tactical ability to sneak my Game Boy into bed? Revealed. The trust generated between me and my parents? Fractured. But the worst part, to me, was the fact that I had nothing to go back to either. Buried Relic is one of the dungeons in the game where the player is forced to quicksave at the start of the dungeon. This forces a save state, which is temporary, and designed to prevent any kind of save scumming that roguelike players may often opt for to abort from unwieldy missions. The player can bypass this in Red Rescue Team by using an escape orb, clearing the dungeon, or, in Buried Relic's case, recruiting Mew. However, if the player is to turn off their console without a full save after a quick save, the mission is treated like a failure, and the player is warped back to the rescue team base without any of the money carried while in the dungeon, and with a pitiful fraction of the items in their toolbox. The only explanation I had come to with this game is that I had somehow fallen asleep on the bottom 63rd floor, and my Game Boy had been on until the battery died. My preparation, gone. My progress, gone. The time that it would take to restock everything? Way too long to be fun. It is here, dear listener, that I learned that nothing will ever go according to plan, and that, as an 8-year-old, I had learned everything there was to know about life. Nothing mattered, and all the planning and build-up had been a waste of time, and everything was terrible, and nothing would ever get better ever again. Of course, I would relearn this fact countless times over the next 15 years, mainly when watching Vikings football. Skol. But in that moment, it was the first time I was mad at the world, and the powers that be, at the guy who invented sleep and its necessity in humans. I would shake my fist in anger as I scarfed down both a bowl of dry mini-wheats and a stack of microwave mini pancakes, and I would pout as I made my way into the snow to the bus stop mere seconds before the yellow menace arrived. But it would change nothing. Who could I blame for my fury? Surely it was Dad's fault, right? He had found me in the morning and taken things away from me. But then there was the game ruining all my well-thought-out and time-consuming preparation. It was that stupid mechanic that took away most of my items that was to blame. Maybe it was the concept of school as a whole? No, I stopped. That was even a little too far. Surely it wasn't my own fault. I couldn't blame myself for something I didn't mean to do. I'd fallen asleep on accident. There's not a chance it was my fault. But as I sat on the cold gray school bus seats, with my head leaning against the window, I realized it. I had made the decision to be so reckless. I should have listened to myself and the weight of my eyelids. I should have quick-saved on the 63rd floor and gone to sleep and picked up the following night. Instead, I had nothing to look forward to for the foreseeable future. As I watched the piles of plowed gray-brown snow whisking by, I suddenly understood my mistake. My own actions had very real consequences. It was my fault. Reeling with the devastation, I felt the bus come to a stop at the bottom of the hill to my school building. I would have the long, cold walk to the front doors to reflect and figure out how I could live with the knowledge that my actions had very real consequences. It has been about 15 years since that day, give or take. Since that chilly February day, I've experienced this shameful feeling plenty more times under various circumstances with far greater consequences than just losing my Game Boy for a day and losing my hard-earned gameplay progress. Mistakes I've made that impacted myself, mistakes that impacted others. The feeling exists for both of these choices. Sometimes I've tried to recount them all as a means of removing them from the shuffling playlist of thoughts playing on my mind's eye. I can write them all down to make the shame less painful, since at least then they'll be real. I suppose there's a small, yet especially cruel sense of irony that sometimes the coarse memory of my father being disappointed and angry at me is now what keeps me awake at night, rather than the elation of the grind through buried Relic. But here I am, trying to remove it from tonight's nightly programming. The year is 2022. It is February. I am 23 going on 24, and I still have not beat buried Relic.